Such expressions as quote-unquote mind, ego, individual, ignorance, etc., are used only as aids for those who seek their self-nature in the earliest stages. They are nothing but mere notions without any inherent substance. The word water is used in the case of a mirage merely so that it can be understood that what appears as water is not water at all, but an illusion. Similarly, various notions are used to show that what appears as diversity is not so, and that what appears as reality is also not so. All is consciousness. So, in that statement, it talks about a mirage, and it says that water is spoken about in regard to a mirage so that you can recognize that the illusion that the mirage is an illusion that there's water, right? But there's not water, right? So consider this. An illusion is only an illusion when it's not an illusion. An illusion is only an illusion when it's not an illusion. So this is a very important thing to consider. Let me say it in another way. A superstition is only a superstition when it's not a superstition. A superstition is only a superstition when it's not a superstition. A mirage is only a mirage when it's not a mirage. A mirage is only a mirage when it's not a mirage. So I'm not going to explain that. That's something for you to ponder, right? Because when it comes to a lot of these things, to just give you all the answers is a waste of time. Because they won't really be answers. They'll just be conceptual, you know what I mean? They'll just be conceptual things. And all of us have learned in school to learn how to regurgitate things, right? So you'll try and remember the answer, so if it comes up again, that you can get a good score on the test. But in life, that's not going to get you anything, is it? You know, if you don't see what these things are pointing to, what these concepts point to, then they're of absolutely no value. So you could be a smart rat and be stupid as all get out. You could be a smart rat and your life could suck more than ever. And there's a lot of people walking around that know a lot, right? That know a lot, but they're stupid. They have a lot of information, but they're stupid. So don't be stupid. So this whole business of, you know, an illusion is only an illusion when it's not an illusion. In the case of a mirage, we say that we talk about water as the content of the mirage, you know, that the mirage is that there's water and there's no water. In your case, in our case, right, the illusion is only an illusion if it's not an illusion. The illusion that is not an illusion is who you think you are. And that's not an illusion. You see? That's not an illusion. If it was an illusion, you wouldn't believe it, right? And if it was an illusion, you wouldn't believe it. And if you didn't believe it, you wouldn't live as if it was true, would you? But you do. You do. That's why in these teachings, the fundamental concepts are very powerful and very useful. The fundamental understandings are very powerful and very useful. And the most fundamental understanding of all there is consciousness. If you keep bringing yourself back to that understanding from wherever you are, as far as what you thought, the concepts you think, you know, the ideas you have, the notions you have about things. If you keep bringing yourself back to all there is consciousness, your questions will answer themselves. Because all of your questions have to do with the idea that it isn't true that all there is consciousness. Isn't that the case? All your questions have to do with the idea that it isn't true that all there is consciousness. So if you keep coming back to all there is consciousness, and if you keep looking to see how is that so, that all there is consciousness, that will keep expanding your understanding, right? And the purpose of the teachings and practices and the purposes of understanding is not to change anything. It's not to change anything. It's to see the truth. It's to recognize what's actually the case. It's not to change anything, just to recognize what's actually the case. To recognize that you are not a separate self. And to recognize, because you're not a separate self, you cannot do anything. And if you can't do anything, then you have no free will. But if you come back to all there is consciousness, then you could look at it from that viewpoint and see that, okay, if all there is consciousness, then consciousness, and this is I'm restating some of the concepts, some basic concepts that Ramesh created, which are very powerful because they can lead to your seeing things as they actually are. And if it is the case that all there is consciousness, then we can say that consciousness exists in a unmanifest form, which you could say is potential energy, potential manifestation, and in a manifest form, which is the manifestation, right? And you could say that what we call reality, you know, what appears to exist is the manifestation of consciousness into form, right? The manifestation of consciousness into form. However, however, all there is consciousness, right? So when it appears that consciousness manifests into form, it's still just consciousness. There is no two. It's not different. There is only consciousness. And when it appears to manifest itself into form, it comes into action occurs, activity occurs. You could call it the vital force, the chi, you know, action occurs, things become alive. And so if all there is consciousness and action occurs, then all of what appears, all of the manifestations are consciousness manifesting itself in diversity, right? Consciousness manifesting itself as people, trees, dogs, everything, right? It's all consciousness taking form, manifesting itself into form, right? And so you could say, given that all there is consciousness, that consciousness is manifesting itself into form, manifesting itself into the world, as the world, and then it is acting in all the activity in the world is consciousness. Consciousness is activity, is consciousness expressing itself. Does that make sense? Because remember, you're going back to the initial concept, all there is consciousness, right? And if that's the case, right, and then to understand what's going on, we have to say that consciousness in its potential form, as potential energy, manifests itself in form, right? Ramesh says that a scientist might call this the Big Bang, right? Potential energy explodes into form. And the universe and all universes and all galaxies then come into existence, right? However, nothing happened because all it is consciousness. Nothing happened. Consciousness manifesting itself into form is still just consciousness, right? So there's no duality involved in any of this. And one of the forms it manifested itself into is called a body-mind organism, human being, a body-mind organism. It manifested itself into a body-mind organism, and it expresses itself through the body-mind organism. Now watch, if consciousness is all there is, and one of its diverse manifestations is the body-mind organism or a human being, right? Then can you see that since all there is consciousness, that body-mind organism that it manifested itself into is not separate. Its behavior is consciousness's behavior, right? One of the things that's unique about the body-mind organism called the human being is that part of the way it manifests itself is it manifests itself with this mechanism that makes it unique from other manifestations. And that mechanism is a mechanism that has it consider itself separate from the source. It has a mechanism that has itself consider itself from the source and consider itself able to act separate from the source. But now watch. But even that mechanism is a manifestation of consciousness. Because if you go back to the fundamental concept that all there is consciousness, it answers the question. It answers whether there's free will. Right? It provides access to seeing things as they are. And when you see things as they are, and as you deepen this understanding, you begin to see that it's beyond opposites. For example, we say, right, as a concession, as I just read that paragraph, we say, just as a notion for people to understand what's being talked about, that there's no real you, right? That there's no real person. We say that, right? But here's the deal. There's no real you, and there's not a not real you. There's no real you, and there's not a no real you. Because if there's no real you, the opposite of that is that there's a real you, right? And in the manifest world, everything has its opposite in order for it to appear, right? But if everything is consciousness and if non-duality is true, there is no real you and there's no not real you. It's like there is no freedom. We talk about freedom, right? That you want the freedom, right? Well, there's no freedom. Because for there to be freedom, there would have to be bondage. Right? That's duality. The nature of consciousness, you can't even say that it's free because it's not possible for it to be anything else. There's no duality to it. There's no opposite to its expression. And so you can't talk about it in terms of freedom or bondage. You can't talk about it in terms of there's a you or there's not a you. There's neither of any of that. There's none of that. It's all conceptual. It's all conceptual. There's none of that. So the final understanding is the understanding that all concepts aren't real. The final understanding is the understanding that all concepts aren't real, and even that concept is not real. And this is the experience of a sage. This is the experience of enlightenment. The experience of enlightenment is non-conceptual, right? It means that it's beyond understanding. It means that it's no longer a matter of knowing that you're not that the person isn't real. It's beyond that. It's no longer a matter of knowing, that they're, that something's real and something's not real. Something appears and something is actually real. It's no longer a matter of any of that. All that's over. All that's over. There is plenty. Everything that manifests itself as an appearance in the world, right? As an appearance in the world, is manifest as has an opposite. Everything. When it comes to the truth, when it comes to consciousness itself, there is no opposite. But in reality, there is no creation and no. In the reality, there's no creation, no manifestation, and no destruction. The relationship between the unmanifest and the manifest is not causal. In reality, there's no movie, there's no creator, there's no source, there's nothing. It's appealing, right? Because if you accept these concepts and you do let go just because you accept the concept, it provides you with a relief. If you accept that there's no free will, I mean really, not bullshit. If you accept there's no free will, really, it's a relief. If there's no free will, you can't do anything wrong because you don't do anything. It's a relief. So that's just a conceptual understanding that can help you as a person experience some relief, right? But then if you want to take it further, if you want to go on from there, if you want the full enchilada, if you want to be enlightened, right? Then you have to go all the way, which is that there's nobody to be relieved. And you have to go beyond that there's nothing happening. There's no cause and no effect, there's no source, there's no time, there's no space, there's no causality. You see, because we're making a concession that we're going to have this conversation in a world where there's time and space. And in the world where there's time and space, there's causality, right? But time and space don't exist. So there's no causality, there's no source. All there is consciousness. See, this is the thing. Even the idea that all there is consciousness will get interpreted by your mind to mean something, to try and explain things that it doesn't explain. Because if all there is consciousness, that's the whole story. There is nothing but consciousness. That's all there is consciousness. If you want complete realization, if you want enlightenment, you have to go all the way to the final understanding. And the final understanding is that there is nothing but consciousness. That's it. There's just consciousness. See, if you keep going back to that, it starts to reveal itself to you. Because you keep seeing that although all there is consciousness, it keeps appearing to be something different than that, right? That's the conditioning. That's the orientation, right? But that's why these concepts are useful, because these concepts can give you a way of understanding things behind the scenes, understanding the bottom line. And the understanding of the bottom line is that it's all consciousness. It's all what appears to be the world is not the world, it's consciousness. What's called reality is not reality, it's consciousness. What you call you is not you, it's consciousness. Your behavior is not your behavior, it's consciousness. Time is consciousness, space is consciousness. And it's just happening. It doesn't mean anything. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't have an intention about anything. Its nature is, if you want to know what the nature of God is, pay attention. The nature of God is what's happening. Now, with our pea-shooter brain, we think that we can understand that. Oh, why does God let babies die? Right? And I love it when people say, well, I won't accept that there's no free will because I can't accept that God would allow some of the things to happen that happened in the world. Okay. So you know better than God. And even that's just consciousness. You don't get it. It's such a joke. When you get it, it's an absolute joke that no matter what is said, no matter what happens, it is nothing but consciousness expressing itself. That's all there is. Because the final understanding is non-conceptual. So no matter what you conceive of, no matter what concepts you have, no matter what perceptions you have, the final understanding is that's all just consciousness. It's actually that simple. It's actually that simple. And if you could, if it was possible to snap your fingers and everything that you believed and all the concepts that you were using to try and understand everything disappeared, right? And the experience that was being had was just consciousness experiencing consciousness, and all there was consciousness, you'd be enlightened. You'd be enlightened, and there'd be no suffering. There'd be no way to suffer. How could you suffer? Who would be there to suffer? And then the way that's spoken about by people who are sages and enlightened beings is that it's just a witness. There's just an awareness of what's happening, which is consciousness aware of itself. There's just an awareness of what's happening. It's not happening to anybody. In fact, nothing's happening. It's just consciousness. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's so simple and it's so obvious. And to be that, and here's the best part. To be that is so simple and so obvious. It's unimaginable how simple and obvious it is, right? And the proof of that is that you are that right now. That's the only truth. The only truth that's non-conceptual. I've said this before. The only truth that's non-conceptual, that's undeniable, is you, right? And you know why that's the case? You know why that's the case? Because that's all that exists. If all there is consciousness, right? Does anything else exist but you? All that we can say is conceptual. Everything that I'm saying is conceptual. But what I'm pointing to, what I'm talking about is not conceptual. And even if I say all there is consciousness, that's still conceptual. But the truth is not conceptual, and the truth is you. You are consciousness, and you are not conceptual. And it is possible for you to be what you are. It must be, right? It must be possible for you to be what you are. And that's enlightenment. And it's available at all times. And all you have to do is have the final understanding, right? That no matter how it appears, no matter what appears, it's just consciousness. And then you just relax and enjoy the ride. Now, obviously, that's going to get processed in your brain, in your mind, and turned into a concept, and you see, that's the thing. It's one thing to see it. You could see it conceptually, right? But to live it, you can't fool Mother Nature. To live it, you got to actually be it. And that's the final trick. That's the final solution. That's the final understanding. It's just like he said here, the final truth, a guide to the ultimate understanding. And if you have the ultimate understanding, if you really have the ultimate understanding, you disappear. You literally just disappear. So don't try this at home.